Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early while it was still dark. She saw that the stone had been rolled away. The doors were locked. What's happening here? That's what's happening. Had been removed from when you turn 2 pages instead of 1.
Yeah.
The story sort of just goes somewhere else. That the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she went running to Simon Peter and to the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said to them, "They've taken the Lord out of the tomb. We don't know where they put him." At that, Peter and the other disciple, John, went out, heading for the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and got to the tomb first. Stooping down, he saw the linen cloths lying there, cloths, plural, but he did not go in. Following him, Simon Peter came in. He just went straight into the tomb, saw the linen cloths lying there too. The wrapping that had been on his head was not lying with the linen cloths, but was folded up in a separate place by itself. The other disciple who had reached the tomb first went in, saw, and believed, for they did not yet understand the scriptures that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to the place where they were staying. Down to verse 24. Thomas, called Twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples were telling him, "We've seen the Lord." But he said to them, "If I don't see the marks of the nails in his hands, put my finger into the marks of his nails, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." In fact, he says, "I will never believe." A week later, his disciples were indoors again, and Thomas was with them. Even though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and look at my hands. Reach out your hand and put it to my side. Don't be faithless, but believe." So there's, as I was coming to over this morning, I was struck by the normalcy of the day, the mundane normalcy. People are pulling in and out of Walmart. The police are arresting somebody for going 36 in a 35 zone on Burgess Road. It's just another day for a lot of people. And we kind of touched on that a little bit this morning. What would it take for someone to say, well, maybe there's something to this that I really need to... after all, it's the most important question that you can ever ask yourself. Number one, is there a God? And then number two, if there is a God, was this dude named Jesus, was he God in flesh? And did he do what he said he did? Because if he arose from the dead, then, as he said, I take heart, I've overcome the world. There is nothing the world can hand it to you that hasn't already been subjected, ultimately, to being under the feet of Christ. Well, but meanwhile, we're writing tickets and we're buying eggs at a somewhat reduced price, but still a little bit more than normal at Walmart. And so there's this mundane thing. Well, this is sort of like Thomas was. Because many of these people today would kind of say, look, that stuff, you're just reading crazy stuff out of a crazy book. Now, I'm not predisposed to believing that, so I'm just going to ignore it. We've got a ball game today. My kid is an all-star. Every kid is an all-star. It's unbelievable how many all-stars there are out there. They must lose a star somewhere along the way because they don't play College D1 baseball. They don't make it to the pros, but they're all-stars. Well, that's for another day, but you get the point. I've got something to do today that's more important. Thomas was not of that order. Thomas was a little bit different. Thomas was saying, look, guys, I saw what they did to that man. You're nuts. You're nuts. I don't care if you say you saw him or not. You're nuts. You're all nuts. Because I saw what they did to that man. And there's no way he's alive. And then a week later, there's this I hate to say it, come to Jesus moment, literally. And he says, I get that. So here, you want evidence, you want some proof? Check that out. Check the wound. Check the wounds. And so my question to some of, and by the way, Easter Sunday is being populated all across America by people who are going to come to church on Easter Sunday. The preacher is going to preach some magnanimous sermon that's going to convince the people so much that they need to change their ways that they're going to come back to church on Easter Sunday. And maybe Christmas. Maybe. So obviously, whatever the people are saying, I don't think the service needs to be geared towards, I'm going to change your mind in 40 minutes. Because if it did, if it worked, survey says. So they're really, what the people are doing are sitting in church going, I bought these clothes, the pants are about an inch too tight. I'm going to eat crawfish over at Aunt Edna's when we get through. Is this dude ever going to shut up? That's the summation of the average person. I think this, and it's kind of, they take a mundane approach to the whole business. And so it doesn't matter much to them. But Thomas, on the other hand, was sitting there saying, this doesn't make any sense at all. You people have lost your mind. I'm not buying it. And the only thing that was going to make him buy it was some evidence, and it was evidence that Jesus was glad to provide. So I offer you this humbly as a possibility. Is there evidence that Jesus would like us to see today that would be somewhat similar to the type of thing where, well, you want evidence? Here, check it out. What's the evidence today? And there may very well be something there. You're going to have to decide that for yourself. John 20 describes two cloths. There would have been the burial linen, and there would have been the head wrapping. It looked something like this. As the corpse was shrouded and then covered, the bloodstains where the person would have been in contact with the cloth would have bled through. And so you would get, if you would, a fingerprint, a footprint, a signature, that's what I want to say, a signature that sort of tells you that there was someone here and you could see this. Well, for over 700 years, 700 odd years, there has been this cloth that was first shown in the 1300s. And by the way, that's about 60% of the brightness. They figure about 40% of it's worn away with over the age. And I can recall watching ABC News in 1988 because this was receiving a lot of attention. And Peter Jennings sat there and sort of said, and I would submit it was almost in a smug tone, a little bit of smugness. The shroud has been demonstrated to be a fake. Carbon-14 has given the dating as coming from the Middle Ages. Can't be what they say it is. And we move on to the next piece of news, which was no doubt doom and gloom. Silly Christians and their silly relics. Well, since that time, I kind of became a curious watchdog of this whole business. What have they got? And so I started looking up, and for example, in 1978, there was a team, the Shroud of Turin Research Project, STURP. They took these group of men, scientists of different fields, and they came in and they spent like 5 days with the shroud. The photographer, the official photographer for this whole event, as well as subjecting it to, he subjected the linen to analysis of his own, was a guy named Barry Schwartz. That name's not Italian. He was quite Jewish. He was a non-practicing Jew. Schwartz, after he said, this is what I thought. He said, first of all, I'd never been to Europe, so I got a free trip to Italy. And I'm like, I'm all in. He said, the night before, the team sat together, and the mindset, the thinking was, we'll go in 1 or 2 days. We'll take this, deconstruct this whole thing, and we'll be on our way. Barry Schwartz wound up spending the rest of his life post that time explaining to people why he believed that the shroud was the actual burial cloth of Jesus. So his life went from mundane to very non-mundane. So when we look at that, this is what they discovered. And this is why he was having these thoughts. He said, first of all, there's no paint on the cloth. Now, if you go read the research on this, it's all over the place. People say whatever they want to say. George Washington said you can believe everything you see on the internet. And this is a classic example of it. But the folks who were actually there, who've actually done the work, this is all settled. This is settled. There's no paint on the image. There's no residue, no pigment, no nothing. The image is three-dimensional, which means that it's not like a photograph. It displays, if they actually put it into an imager, and the face comes out of the image, and it actually shows real contours and details. The blood on the cloth was put there, but it was there before the image formed. So blood, cloth, image second. So we've got two processes that we need to deal with here. First of all, how did the blood get there? And then second, how did the image get there? The blood, they've even typed, the blood is AB. Remember that, AB. AB is one of the rarest blood types. It's about 5% of the population. So that means that you're really drawing down the population. And remember, there were two cloths. There were pollen samples. One of the guys that went in there was I don't know what you call him, pollenographer. I don't know what it is. He was an expert in this stuff. So he took samples off of the cloth, and he discovered that there was pollen that would be indigenous to the Middle East, the Middle Eastern region. There were also dirt accumulations that they took off the cloth. One of them was around the feet. One of them was around the knees. One of them was around the nose. Now, why do you suppose the feet fine? Why do you suppose the knees and the nose? Scripture declares that Jesus collapsed 3 times on the way to the cross. So, if we're forging through some kind of, this is just the data, right? So just read the data with an open mind. There were 3 of them. They confirmed, it is settled that it's not a painting, it's not a photograph. Carbon-14 says that it was Middle Ages. Well, the people who were suspects said, wait a minute, you took a sample from a place where it's been scorched. These are scorch marks here, right there, right there. This thing was in a fire, and it actually survived, but not without some damage. And they said, well, and you also, the fire could have screwed it up. Well, maybe, perhaps. But they just did something 2 years ago that they call wide-angle X-ray spectroscopy. Anything with that name's got to be slick, right? This is what they say in their abstract of their published paper. The degree of natural aging of the cellulose that constitutes the linen of the investigated sample obtained by X-ray analysis shows that the fabric is much older than the 7 centuries proposed by the carbon dating in 1988. The experimental results are compatible with the hypothesis that the shroud is a 2,000-year-old relic as supposed by Christian tradition. It's been reinvestigated, and it's like, wait a minute, maybe not. So this is what we have today. This is on display in Turin, the Shroud of Turin. And they've had it, they know the history of this thing back to the 1300s, but they can't go any further than that. So now, one of the things that you'll notice, it looks kind of like an owl. It's a very faint image. You may see it, you may not, but it's kind of sunken eyes and that kind of thing. But there's a couple of things I want you to notice. Right there and right there. What is that? That's a bloodstain. What is that? That's a bloodstain. And then you can see on the arms, what is that? Bloodstains. Now, this would be biblically supported. The feet would have been gone through, the feet would have bled, and they would have pooled the blood down at the bottom of the cloth. That aligns with the spear wound.
That's the whole body laying horizontally?
Yeah.
So like that way.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Yes. Now, this is what people saw for years. And they didn't really, and they were like, okay. And then in the late 1800s, a guy named Secondo Pia, obviously he was Irish. Secondo took a picture of the shroud and he went to develop it. Now, Mr. Photographer, in the old days, you actually had to develop the thing and it created a negative. The negative being a mirrored, reversed image of what you took the picture of. He took the picture of that and he got that. And when he developed the negative and he held it up, he said he literally almost dropped the plate because it was like, oh my gosh, what have I got? Because details start showing up that you can't possibly see on the positive. So, for example, to show that it's a negative, see the blood stain here, but it's actually there. And then you'll notice that you'll see these little drops here, those are over there. All that to say is because you're going to see the picture is on this side of the spear, but when they actually do the what you'll see in the slide, it's depicted on this slide, on this side. That's because it's a negative. Well, you can see some things right here. For example, that's blood. And you can see all these little dots up here. They've identified over 50 spots that were head wounds. And when we have a picture of that, the crown of thorns is not accurate. It's a helmet of thorns. Just crushed down on the head, not just this little, because the crucifixion tends to be romanticized. You know, it looks where, you know, it's sort of pastoral and all. No. The Romans inflicted, just essentially made this ball of thorns and then crushed it on the head. Now that's interesting because there's no recorded, again, fact, there's no recorded occurrence of another prisoner being executed wearing a crown of thorns. This would be unique in the Roman. There's no documented occurrence of that. When they were crucified, they were flogged, they were all that stuff, but that one is never noted, but yet here it is. So this is a highlighted one, and then you can see that's a better picture where you kind of get the negative sort of details that begin to come out come out when it's under subjected to photographic analysis. So here you can see clearly blood stains. That's up in the wounds and whatnot. So another picture of that here, where this was a crease in the cloth. And you get none of those details until you get to here. What do you see right there? Right there. Teeth. Hold on to that. Right there. 2 front teeth. And this is what typically might look like a helmet of thorns. So this was just mushed down on the head, inflicting over approximately 50 wounds for the man on the shroud. We'll just call him that. The man on the shroud, there were approximately 50 head wounds, puncture wounds. In a detailed analysis, you can kind of see it there. There's where the blood would be highlighted, and you can tell it's just literally. Now, one of the things we know about puncture wounds is they don't tend to throw a lot of blood. But yet, you would expect by the time that thing comes off, you would expect to start seeing that type of pooling around there. Here you can see the teeth again. So we mentioned that blood first, image second. And that would be, this is what blood does when it actually coagulates and stuff. It leaves a serum ring. Now, a serum ring would be unknown. I mean, the ancients had no idea because you see it under ultraviolet fluorescent photography. It doesn't show up, or a microscope perhaps, but if you look at it, you don't see anything. So what we're saying here is that the blood staining, it observed this, so it's kind of everywhere. It shows properties different from the image, which is faint and negative. So you can see the blood really well, you can see the image not so well, two different processes. This suggests that the blood staining was not caused by the same process that created the image. But now this is what the blood looks like when it's fluoresced by ultraviolet. And you see the ring, that's the serum ring. It's present on the shroud. Confirmation again, it's actual blood. But the question begins, how do you decide, how do you know to do this when it takes techniques that are very modern in order to actually demonstrate that that's what took place? Now, so the blood itself can be identified as real blood, as Barry Schwartz said, and it's AB. Notice all these scratch marks here, particularly on the back, but here, that's a scourging. We're not talking a small amount of whips. There's the blood stain. The feet are down below. We're going to come back to the hands. Notice the blood staining right there on the wrist. They estimate that he was beat approximately 120 blows by the Roman whip, the flagrum, which would have been three-tailed, and it had dumbbells in it. So one on the left, one on the right. They've actually recreated what the wounds look like as a corpse. The head is raised because it's in rigor mortis, so it would be tight, as well as the feet drawn up, the knees drawn up. But as you can see, there's not a portion of the body that's not absolutely, for lack of a better term, destroyed. And there's the chest wound, but again, it shows, the image shows, but when it's negative, then you get where it actually is on the right side. The rear picture of the corpse, of the man on the shroud, also shows the scourging marks, and they were something like that. There's literally not an inch of body that hasn't been destroyed. This is blood that seeped down from the wound and came behind the body. They've identified that off the shroud. So when the body was upright, it would have come down, so you get different blood flows as that's going on. And then you can see here where the tremendous amount of blood would have been deposited from the feet. Highlighted, that's obviously a reconstruction, but it shows what the scourges would have been like. Arms, hands, everywhere. So now we have two things. We've got the side wound, we've got the crown of thorns, we've got the scourge marks, we've got the hands that are crossed, we've got the blood stain. By the way, traditional photography or traditional paintings showed crucifixion taking place through the palm. That won't work. The actual crucifixion was there's a place that they actually designated, and that is where you can affix a body to a piece of wood and it will stay there. So all of this stuff, again, the scourges, the shroud. Note the hands. What are you looking at? You see the bones. The bones are clearly present in the hand. It's like an X-ray. Whatever energy created this image was similar to an X-ray. And now you can see, so now you begin to understand why the teeth would be visible, not because it was drawn back, but because of some sort of radiated image that was able to do this. Now, some people have complained, well, the fingers are way too long. That's obviously a forgery and that type of stuff. But what they've discovered is that depending on how you take an X-ray, it can change, modify the actual, the perception of it. So it would be from the image and whatnot. But you can see the blood running down the arm. Also, you don't see thumbs. There's no thumbs visible. They've discovered on cadavers that it destroys a nerve when you penetrate there, draws the thumb in. So the thumb is not exposed. Again, another anatomical detail that you just, why did somebody come up with that? And we said there were two cloths. The second cloth, which is being investigated, is called the Sudarium of Oviedo. It's in Spain. It's the head cloth. They have that. The cloth on the body, the blood type, AB. 5% of the people approximately have that blood type. The blood type on the Sudarium, AB. Now, when they've taken and reconstructed the image and then laid the face cloth on it, which is what we have left, there's a tremendous amount of congruence. Particularly, notice all the blood around the nose, lips, face. One of the places that you would obviously be getting blood, but it's more than that. The blood type is AB. The blood type on the Sudarium is AB. And then pay attention to this. This is a published research paper. It said this: a large excess of calcium is observed close to the tip of the nose. It is not typical to find dirt in this zone of the anatomy. People typically don't have dirt around their nose. But it is the same zone where a particular presence of dust was also found on the shroud. The very low concentration of strontium in the stained areas matches well with the limestone characteristic of the Rock of Calvary in Jerusalem. So whoever had this on had the same blood type and had the same dirt gather up under their nose. Part of it stayed on the shroud, part of it stayed on the head cloth. Now, we were talking about that a little bit this morning. How can you understand what Christ went through and then go buy eggs at Walmart? What allows that to take place? Who has believed our message? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up like a tender shoot, like a root out of dry ground. That was Israel, a root out of dry ground. And here comes this person where there shouldn't have been a person like that. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him. Nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He didn't look like a rock star. He didn't have some kind of, designation that proved he was richer or better, and so you just want to hang out with him. No, there was nothing in his to attract him. He was despised and rejected by mankind. We forget that sometimes. We were talking a little bit about health and wealth and how Jesus just wants to provide us with stuff where his life doesn't look anything like what they claim. He was rejected by mankind, a man of suffering. He was familiar with pain, like one from whom people hide their faces. He didn't want to look at him. He was despised, and we held him in low esteem. That's him. That's Jesus. That's the guy that we ignore when we got to go play Little League baseball, or we got to go get our eggs, or we got to do whatever it is we got to do, because surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. We considered him punished by God. Why? Because he was crucified on a tree. He was cursed. Cursed by God, Deuteronomy says, is anybody that hangs on a tree. He was stricken by God, and he was afflicted. He was pierced for our transgressions and crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him. By his wounds we are healed. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. That's what it looks like when God punishes sin. When he destroys the barrier between man and God, it was with that in mind. Yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. This wasn't an accident. This was a plan. And it was carried through all the way to, my God, take this cup away from me. You think Jesus knew this scripture? I'm pretty sure he's fairly familiar with it. And then he said, not my will, but yours, because your will is going to be to crush me and cause me to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life an offering for sin, he will see his offspring and prolong his days. Who are the offspring? The church. Prolong his days. We still worship him 2,000 odd years later. And the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. After he has suffered, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. Therefore, I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong. Because he was poured out his life until he died, and he was numbered with the transgressors, for he bore the sins of many, and he made intercession for the transgressors. Now, some people will go to great lengths to say, well, we don't have proof. I agree. You can call him the man on the shroud. But Jesus asked asked Peter, who do you say I am? And you got to deal with it. You got to come to grips with it. You got to fish or cut bait. Who do you say I am? Now, you can ignore the situation and go, well, there's probably, you can kind of be like Dumb and Dumber. It's like a 1 in a million chance that it might not. You're saying I got a chance. You're saying there's a chance. Or you can take the notion of, well, the same samples of limestone were found in the same areas. By the way, the cloth matches up at over 120 points of congruence. That's been satisfied through research as well. And we can even, so God bless AI, right? They've actually said, based upon the Shroud of Turin, why don't you draw Jesus? And they have. This is what they say.
Looks a lot like the chosen guy.
That's why they chose.
Just an average guy. Nothing special. Except he's the Savior of the world. So if you're going to bed at night and you're asking yourself, what is this, who am I actually worshiping? Ask yourself that question in light of what this shroud offers as evidence and testimony. At the very least, it is the most accurate, we have no idea how it got here, reproduction of someone that would have been a whole lot like Jesus and followed in every detail that we can possibly imagine. And we didn't do it by a painting, and we didn't do it by, and we have some kind of energy that created one part of it, and we have natural blood that created the other. Yeah, okay. Who do you say I am? You know, Thomas, when he put his hand in the wound, he could have said, well, you may have had a bad wreck on the way over here. He could have, but Thomas took the evidence where it led him. That last step of faith, because even at that point, he still said, my Lord and my God, my Savior. Now it's all making sense to him. So Easter, we're not really dealing with, it's a celebration. Yeah, it is. But before you get to that celebration, you have to appreciate what that man went through.
For us.
For you. For anybody that's just willing to take the information and deal with it. Now, because of people who said, I saw that man, that corpse I saw that come off the cross. I saw that wrapped in that shroud. I saw them put the headband on him. And I'm going to go out now and I'm going to tell you that man's alive. I don't think so. There's only one reason they would say, I saw the man alive, after they had seen the man looking like that. And it would have to be, inescapably, there's only one conclusion you can draw. Paul says 500 people at one time. And that was kind of a, you want proof? I'll give you proof. You won't just say, well, he's nuts and she's nuts, because we can pick them off one at a time. How are you going to pick off 500? Actually says over 500. Easter represents not a yearly celebration. Easter represents the pivotal moment in history where we delineate between one man there is no possibility that you can raise from the dead. We've never seen that happen. There's been people who've been resuscitated. There's been no one that died, heart stopped, brain dead, 3 days, and then said, I'm back. And whatever it was, that image that I believe, I'm absolutely convinced of, that image was what you saw 1 nanosecond before that body started moving. And the interesting thing was, being a neatnik, the first thing he did was fold the cloth neatly and place it in the corner. And that's just one more kind of a dead men don't fold cloths. And you say, well, somebody stole the cloth. I can assure you, if somebody stole the body, nobody said, Tommy, go fold the cloth. Stick it over in that corner for me, please. Good job. Barry Schwartz says he was talking one time. Barry died a couple of years ago, but he was talking with his wife, his mother. His mother's a long time Orthodox Jew. Had never seen him do a presentation on the shroud. He was talking, I think it was in Pennsylvania. And when he got through, he got in the car and it was like quiet. No, he finally broke the silence. He said, well, what do you think, Mom? She said, oh, there's no doubt. That's the real deal. It was very simple. He was expecting all kinds of blowback. He said, why do you think that? And she said, nobody keeps something for 2,000 years old if it's a fake. Somebody, don't know who, looked in that tomb, figured all this out, and said, we need to keep that. One of the reasons they said we need to keep that is, look at this. Look at what? Look at the image. Yeah, keep that. And for all that time, for over 2,000 years, it was held close. Even in the 1300s, they're showing it to massive crowds. That's the most studied Christian relic. That's the most studied relic, period. It's been analyzed, reanalyzed, and no one's come up with a way that what's the energy source that created the image? They don't know. But we do, because that's where faith comes in. Just that little bit of conclusion. I can draw the rest of the picture. So this Easter, when you're thinking about, oh, well, it's an empty tomb and everybody, but you got to go through the passion to get to the resurrection. And so have an appreciation what the man went through. Because if that is what changed, that's what changed the disciples forever. It wasn't, oh man, do you remember the Sermon on the Mount? Yeah, that was great. That was so great. We're going to go out and tell the whole world. We're going to change the world because of what he said. No. If Jesus would have stayed in the tomb, the Sermon on the Mount was an afterthought. Remember that time he raised Lazarus from the dead? If he'd have stayed in the tomb, that was an afterthought. That goes away. The thing that changed the disciples and made them go back and apply the things that they had seen was the resurrection. If there is no resurrection, we above all are to be pitied. Eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow we die. Now, Paul was, he didn't struggle for words. So, we started off with he is risen. And the answer is,
He is risen indeed.
he is risen indeed. Go forth and with that knowledge. And as those 12 change the world, I believe there's coming a time where the world will open up and rethink and begin to accept the evidence that he's provided for us, just like the evidence he provided for Thomas. Happy Easter. Father, we thank you for the opportunity to be here today. We thank you for your word. We thank you for this relic that's been in existence now for, the dating says, back to the time of Christ. It has the pollen from that area, that has limestone from that area, that has anatomical details that are incredibly precise and accurate. for an image that can't be explained and blood type that can be identified, for a head covering that has the same blood type and matches quite well with the wounds that are already displayed on the cloth. That's our Thomas moment. It may not, and probably won't, convince the skeptic, because the skeptic can't be convinced. But for the person who opens their heart and mind, it's a game changer. And that knowledge propelled 12 men to change the world. May it propel us to change our world in just a small way. It's in your Son's name we pray, and everyone said,
Amen.